All right, so did Jesus drink? Was he a drunkard? I think that's the bigger issue, is whether or not he was a drunkard or a heavy drinker. Many people will use a particular text, one particular text in Matthew. Let's go ahead and take a look at it to suggest that Jesus was a drinker. Matthew 11:19 says this: "The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, 'Behold, a gluttonous man and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds.'" Okay. So many people will take this here, "Behold, a gluttonous man and a drunkard," and say, look, clearly Jesus was a drunkard. The Pharisees are saying Jesus is a drunkard. He drank. Clearly, that's permission for me to get drunk. And the Bible is not saying it's a sin or whatever, X, Y, and Z, you fill in the blank. That's the understanding that many people draw from this text. It says up here, the Son of Man came eating and drinking. Okay? And we're connecting this word drinking with this word drunkard here. So we're assuming that's alcoholic beverage. I think that's the proper context here. We can rely on that. So between this and the wedding at Cana, all right, and John that we're told about where Jesus turns water into wine, I think it's safe to assume Jesus probably consumed wine, an alcoholic beverage, considering that it was such a staple in the Jewish diet, especially when it came to the holy feasts and stuff like that. They would use it a lot for Passover and for different feasts of this nature. But the real issue we want to look at today was, did he take drinking, all right, and cross the line into drunkenness? And what does this particular text mean? It's super easy. Let's just dive into it. It comes straight from Deuteronomy. Jesus is essentially referring to something in Deuteronomy, and this is probably, if you're anything like me, it blew my mind. So this is really cool. Deuteronomy 21:18 through 21. We're going to read these, and it's going to make so much sense. So it's really cool. It says this: "If any man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father or his mother, and when they chastise him, he will not even listen to them, then his father and mother shall seize him, bring him out to the elders of his city at the gate of his hometown." Okay, so the foundational context here is we're dealing with a stubborn and rebellious son who doesn't listen to correction. Okay, they can bring him to the elders of the city. All right, so now watch what happens. They shall say, the parents shall say to the elders of his city, "This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." Sound familiar? So what Jesus is doing is he's drawing the attention of his audience back to this. Why? The answer is in verse 21. Let's just finish reading this out. "Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death." There it is. "So you shall remove the evil from your midst. All of Israel will hear of it and fear." So what's happening in Matthew 11:19? This is incredibly interesting, because the people Jesus is talking to and referring to by giving him the label of a glutton and drunkard are the quote-unquote elders of the city. They're the religious Jews who study and uphold and scrutinize people according to Torah, or the moral law that God has given. Okay, so he is being accused, Jesus that is being accused of being a glutton and a drunkard. What does that mean? Jesus is drawing people's attention to this. In other words, it's an idiom of an accusation that's saying he is a stubborn and rebellious son of Israel, and they desire to stone him to death so that they can remove what they consider evil from their midst. So Jesus is extracting the reality that these Pharisees and elders and religious Jews want to stone him. That's what Jesus is saying. That he is viewed as evil to the point of being worthy of a stoning and being put to death by the Pharisees and religious people. Jesus is not saying he is literally a drunkard or a glutton. He's in no way stamping approval on drunkenness. In no way. He's stamping no approval on gluttony. Okay? So this is what Jesus is drawing his audience's attention to in Matthew 11:19. He's drawing it back to Deuteronomy 21. And this is a beautiful example of why we must be well versed in the Old Testament to really understand the New Testament, especially Jesus' teachings, because so much of what Jesus did, accomplished, and taught is pulled from the Old Testament. And so I hope this has been helpful for you, insightful for you. It was a neat discovery for me. I hope it was the same for you. Until next time, God bless.